Ferrari struggled. It was another McLaren win too, and George Russell somehow got himself on the podium. I'm Rachel, and this is my 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix race rambling. So starting off as always with the weekend rating. I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. The photo here is of a pit stop because I think most of the events happened because of a pit stop. Not necessarily, I was going to say not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's kind of a bad thing. Obviously, we'd prefer to see real racing, and we saw some of it, which is why it's a 7 out of 10. But ultimately, the race win happened because of pit stops, and so that's kind of boring to me. I mean, I was going to say the drive Lando had was great, but was it? Like, it really was lucked out from strategy. Really could have gone either way. When he did that, he didn't even know it was going to work. So that's kind of boring. If there was an overtake at the end, that would have made it more exciting. I'm happy that we at least had an attempt of it. Otherwise, it would have been a kind of lame finish. But decent amount of overtakes. Not as many as we would love, but better than some other races have been. So 7 out of 10. Entertaining enough race. I enjoyed it. Moving on to quali. So kind of a crazy session there, unexpected, with lots to talk about, so we'll just kind of start from the bottom. So something got stuck in Ocon's tire, and so he, right as he kind of got out of the pit lane, so he couldn't be assisted, so that kind of messed him up and he got knocked out P18th. Hamilton was on used tires in Q2 because he had to do 2 runs in Q1, which meant he couldn't go as well as he wanted to in Q2, and he got knocked out. Quite disappointed in himself, really saying some harsh things about himself, obviously made worse by Leclerc being on pole, but I don't think, I mean, we have a whole section about this, but I don't think what he said was quite fair to himself, but at the same time, I get it, so we'll talk about it, but obviously unfortunate for him, not what you want to see. The reason why Charles got pole is because he was very clear about what he wanted, and Ferrari gave it to him, saying, I don't care about anything else. I just want to be at the front. I don't want to have any cars in front of me, and that he got, and it worked out well for him. And that's been what I've been wanting from Charles. I've been wanting him to truly advocate for himself and actually get what he wants. I think that's the sort of the one advantage Sainz had over him, is he was a bit more vocal about what he wanted, and he got it more often than Charles. I don't know if that's because Charles was a bit too passive about it or what, but he got what he wanted here. He didn't get what he wanted in the race, obviously, and so that didn't quite work out, but oh my, will we talk about Ferrari. So we have Colapinto ahead of Gasly, which is interesting, not by much. Colapinto in P14th, Gasly in P17th. In qualifying sessions like this, it's really not that much of a gap. It really could have gone either way, but it'll feel good for Colapinto to be ahead there. Antonelli, I actually want to talk about Antonelli for a second. P15. There's been, since Spa, a lot of discussion about Antonelli, speaking about him being promoted too early. There's too much pressure on him, and I have to say I disagree. I think there's a lot of recency bias there. He's really not been performing poorly by any means. I think he's been performing quite on expectation. I mean, even today, like, he did 48 laps on the hard tire to finish 10th. That's a great performance, especially for a rookie in a Mercedes. I mean, the reason they did it is because we all knew they weren't going to be fighting for the championship this season. If they were, it wouldn't have gone that way. There wasn't really room for him in the Williams regardless. I mean, I guess they would have taken, I don't know. Williams is obviously going to prefer Sainz, who's going to be there for a longer term. I think Carlos didn't want to go to Mercedes for a year. Like, it just makes sense that he went to Mercedes. And there's pressure on everybody. In F1, everybody has their moments. Of course, you feel maybe a bit more sensitive and worried about, I mean, I was going to say maybe you feel more sensitive and worried about it when it's rookie, but Hamilton is showing signs of that, and we're all quite worried about it. So it doesn't really matter when in your career you're under stress. You have a bad weekend, like, people are going to talk about it and feel bad for you if you're talking to the right people. And even like this conversation about, you know, everybody's trying to protect Kimi, but the real way to protect him would have been to not put him in the Mercedes seat this year. And I disagree. I don't think there's any such thing as protecting in Formula One. obviously assuming like you're acting fairly and you're not doing like what Red Bull and Alpine have been doing of like knocking out rookies and putting them in positions that obviously sets them up for failure. Beyond that, I don't think there's any way to not have pressure on a driver or to properly protect a driver. Like, once you're in F1, you're in F1. There's gonna be pressure. You can't protect that. Like, it's just what you've signed up for. And I don't even think like Antonelli is doing that poorly. I really don't. So I just wanted to touch on that here because I don't think it needs this whole section, but I wanted to mention that because I've seen a lot of discussion about that, and I just really disagree, and I think there's a lot of recency bias there. I think he's been doing quite well. Okay, moving on. Good for the Racing Bulls, both up into Q3, 9th and 10th. Verstappen just ahead of them in 8th, but that was Verstappen's worst qualifying session of the year. Then we have Bortoletto in P7. Great for him. I'm very excited for him. We'll talk a little bit more about him later. All good things. Then we have Alonso and Stroll, which is surprising. Sometimes they just like have a good weekend out of nowhere. This is one of those. Very happy for Alonso specifically. There was concern he might not have been able to race. He didn't do FP1 because he was managing a muscular issue in his back. So happy to see that he's okay. It would be quite unfortunate if there was, you always want to retire in any sport because you want to, not because your body is failing you. So I'm happy to see that. Russell up in P4, as expected. Leclerc was the real shock, but again, I think that's partially luck, partially he got what he wanted, and Ferrari actually listened to him. Okay, so on to the race. Yuki actually started in the pit lane because he replaced his power unit, so broke park for a man, had to start in the pit lane, ended up finishing P17th. Not as good as last weekend, but it's okay. I mean, obviously not ideal, but it wasn't last, so there's that. Colapinto did finish ahead of Gasly in the race as well, but that's because Gasly had a 10-second penalty for causing a collision with Sainz, and they're still both the second last to finish, so it's like not really a benefit there. Nico Hülkenberg did have a penalty for a full start by 5 seconds, but still came up and finished P13th. Dude, the Saubers just on one recently. They were talking about that in the post show, and I agree. Maybe I'm going to eat my words when I said that potentially the Williams is safe because they are kind of having a down streak as Sauber is having a good streak. So we'll see where that goes. But spoiler alert, Bortoletto did finish P6, so he started well and he finished well, and I'm very happy with that for him. He's really endeared me. All of the rookies have really endeared me. Hajar and Bortoletto specifically, but we'll talk about that. Behrman boxed to retire because of like damage to his car. The race said I'm not quite sure what happened there. I didn't see anything big. Maybe I completely missed it, but that's unfortunate for Ollie Behrman. The Mclarens, we'll talk about them in a second. But again, to the Astons, double points for them. Again, like just sometimes they have a good weekend, and they did. No action on the Hamilton and Max situation. Let me just say that I think Max was being a little feisty, and potentially Hamilton, because what ended up happening is Hamilton just didn't go to the stewards, and the Ferrari representative just kind of was like, yeah, whatever. He went off himself. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think Max was being a little feisty. I don't think there was contact, but there doesn't have to be contact for you to be pushing somebody off the track. And maybe Hamilton just wasn't in the mood for it, but whatever. With that, Verstappen, finishes P9th and Hamilton P12. Really bad for both of them. We'll talk about that more. I'm really trying not to like repeat myself too much. And then George Russell got lucky and finessed himself up into P3 because Leclerc had a breakdown, which I'm not going to talk about it all right now because we'll get into, but I will talk about the Mclarens now because I don't think they necessitate their whole own section for like once. And that's mostly because they got lucky that, well, it was funny because Jolene Palmer at the start said, oh, with Lando losing 2 spots and going back to 5th and Piastri in 2nd, like their race just got a lot easier for them. Obviously, they'll push forward for Piastri. He's the one in contention for the win. Norris is not, and then look what happens. But I think it did still kind of cover their own ass for them because it really came down to strategy. Lando was saying it really came down to strategy. Even the team principal was saying it really came down to strategy. Like, they weren't quite sure that the one stop was going to work. They just tried it. They're like, well, why not? Literally, I think he said, yeah, why not? On the radio, and it ended up working. partially lucky that Russell pit moved out of the way for him. That was lucky. Whatever. And they really did try with Piastri, and if I'm Piastri, I'm kind of annoyed, not for anything, but he literally didn't do anything wrong. I mean, except for the lockup at the end, but I don't know. I still think maybe at that point it wouldn't have happened. I don't know. Second last lap. Wasn't quite close enough. Would he have been close enough the last lap if he hadn't locked up? I don't know. We'll never know. But he pit before Piastri, and then Charles still came out ahead of him, and then Piastri came pit after him next and still came up behind him, and then actually overtook him. Yeah, you could even hear on the radio, they were very clearly like, the only person I care about is I want to finish ahead of my teammate, both of them. I think at one point Piastri was like, I don't care about covering off Leclerc, I just want to get ahead of Norris, and then they pit him anyway to cover him off. And then they were saying to Norris, you know, if there's a safety car right now, we'll pit you because we can't, we'll put you on hards. And he's like, no, put me on softs. I need to be able to fight, because they literally said you'll only be behind Piastri, and he's like, no. So I think it's funny how blatant it is. Of course it is. At this point it has to be blatant. Okay, moving on. We'll get to all the stuff I didn't talk about because they have their own sections, but best driver here has to be Gabby. Of course it has to be Gabby. He's 6 in a Sauber. Oh, what the hell. Obviously the Sauber has taken a step forward, which I really wasn't expecting. I don't know if I've talked about this before, but I really was expecting this. Well, I've talked about it before, but I don't know how recently. I wasn't expecting Sauber to have half a decent year at all. I was expecting them to be quite poor. I thought they would put a lot of their resources towards 2026 when it would be new regs and when it would be Audi. Obviously, that's not the case, and I think that's a benefit to them. We're really at a point now where we're not really going to see any more upgrades. Maybe one last round of upgrades for some people after the summer break, but like beyond that, once we're out of Europe, people are really going to be focusing on 2025. So I think it'll be interesting to see kind of where things go from here, especially for the Williams, especially for the Ferrari. I don't know, because I'm just, we're jumping ahead to championships now, but I have to say it before I forget. I had predicted that Charles would win the Drivers' Championship. Obviously, I was wrong. I thought McLaren would still win the Constructor Championship. I just thought the fighting might knock enough points away individually. Clearly, that's not the case. And clearly, it's gonna be a McLaren that's gonna win both championships. I just think it's interesting that it's so... We came into this year thinking it would be one of the most competitive seasons ever. And really, it was last season. And it's sort of because I think a lot of people now are just like, well, it isn't working, so we're just gonna jump ship. Nobody's like upgrading throughout the whole year like they were last year, where we had like all of a sudden Ferrari was doing well, all of a sudden McLaren was doing well, all of a sudden Mercedes was doing quite well for a couple of races. So I just wanted to point that out, drawing it back to best driver here, Mr. Gabriel Bortoletto. Happy to see that the Sauber has improved. I think it's a good morale boost for everyone there. It doesn't feel good coming into a team, even if you're fully taking it over, that's been doing poorly. Especially happy for Gabby, because I think he and Hajar are kind of tied right now for my best rookie. I've also seen people talking about that, so I wanted to hop in on that quickly. Best rookie so far has to be him or Hajar, because I think they had the lowest expectations and have now really wowed me, at least. And both of them have had kind of different but difficult situations. With Hajar, there's been a lot of instability there with who's his teammate, with who's his team principal. I kind of came into it thinking he was a bit too hot-headed. I mean, that is the Red Bull way, but if you don't channel it correctly, it just is not helpful to anyone. And I think he's really figured out how to channel it correctly, and it's been working, even amongst all of this instability. And then for Gabriel Bortoletto, the car was really bad at the start of the season, and he's still been able to find a way to drive it and not get in his head about it now that the car has improved. I want to give credit to Hülkenberg there for being a really good driver as well, not to like take any credit away from Bortoletto, but I think he was a fantastic choice for Sauber and for Audi, and I'm very happy with that, even though I was quite critical of him returning. So I want to eat my words. I think he's been a great development driver and race driver, but you know what I mean. Okay. Ferrari. So this picture really sums it up. Leclerc held the lead at the start. Even Piastri tried to undercut him. He stayed ahead. Kind of a McLaren flub on that one. It wasn't really going to work. And then he pit before Piastri on the second stop and stayed ahead until he was overtaken. He also kind of got unlucky when Russell pit out of Lando's way, but in the end that helped Lando and hurt Piastri more than it hurt Charles, because it just kind of self-destructed for Charles, which as it tends to do. And then he did get a 5-second penalty, which in the end didn't do anything because he was more than 5 seconds ahead of who was behind him, for driving erratically with Russell, which I think is completely fair. When it's safety concerns, you can't do that. There has to be a penalty. So, obviously really mad on the radio, the longest message I've ever seen personally on the radio there, and he's quite upset. You know, we have to do this. We discussed the thing we discussed. What? All these things, upset that they went into a direction he didn't want. I think he seemingly thought that either, he said that he thought there was something in their control that they were messing up that he didn't want. So he thought, well, I got Pole when you listen to me and now you're not listening to me and look how it's going. He thought it was either a strategy issue or a setup issue. We didn't quite hear what it was. He didn't very much talking in code. In the end, he said, wasn't anything they could do. There was an issue, which, yeah, makes sense considering the issues he had at the beginning with apparently like something stopping, I don't know, cutting in and out. I'm hitting a point with this. And I'm sure many of you have hit this point and come back around from the hope and everything before, but I'm really getting to a point where I'm frustrated with, Leclerc could probably win a championship if he wanted to. It's not seemingly going to happen with Ferrari, and I don't know, are you going to regret more leaving Ferrari, or are you going to regret more not doing what you can do to win a championship? It's different for Lewis and Seb because they have won. For Charles to just put it all on, and I mean, I'm saying that, but there's really more emotion there that I'm not really giving him credit for with his dad, with Jules Bianchi. Maybe for him it really is Ferrari or nothing. But it would, in my view, be such a shame if it never worked out for him. Especially if he just like decided he needed to do it with Ferrari and nobody else. And to an extent I respect that, but to another extent I'm like, dude, if you want to win, you've got to win. And then this even kind of ties into the Hamilton stuff. I think they were asking, you know, what happened to Leclerc help kind of soften the blow for Hamilton? And it was like, well, I don't think it softens the blow for Hamilton. I think it would have been worse if Leclerc did win. Obviously, Hamilton being very upset, blaming himself after qualifying. And I don't think that's fair either, because, I mean, look what happened in the race. When it's a Ferrari, it's never your fault only, which I think is kind of interesting considering that they've renewed F'ed for multiple years, which I agree with. And I'm just, if anything, the most grateful it silenced the Horner to Ferrari conversations, which had already been kind of silenced. They popped up and then they went away. But I don't know. You've got to have trust in your team, and now does Leclerc even have trust in the team? The team doesn't seem to have trust in themselves. It's the whole, well, they're Ferrari, they should be winning. Really getting to them, and of course we know this. But when it's like getting this upsetting to Lewis Hamilton is when it gets concerning. I am quite concerned for Hamilton. Hopefully the break will do him well. He's seemingly teasing something during the break, which I'm like, don't say anything. Don't do that yet. You have another year in your contract. Do it. But I don't know. We'll just have to see. But I think, I mean, Leclerc literally said the one opportunity so far we had a chance to win a race this year, we lost it from our own issues. So that's really the crux of the issue, isn't it? Nothing else to say without beating a dead horse. Moving on to Red Bull, more so a Verstappen check-in than anything. This is the first race in really a long time, like ever. I haven't seen Max much in the race. The only time I really saw him when he was doing a couple risky overtakes. He had a couple good ones into the chicane, and then that situation with Hamilton. I didn't even know where he finished until I looked it up, P8. I hardly saw him in the broadcast. I feel like even when so far this season, when it has been McLaren being quite dominant, we've still kind of seen him. And I just didn't, which makes sense considering he says he doesn't expect Red Bull to win the rest of the season. And I mean, Max can be dramatic, but like not that dramatic necessarily. I mean, the fact that he got held up by Liam Lawson, who was ahead of him, is indicative of where Red Bull's at, but also a positive indication of where Lawson is at. And I do want to point on that. That's why this is a Red Bull check-in, not just a Max check-in, because I am very proud of Liam Lawson. I was concerned that was the one, like you're talking about not protecting Kimi Antonelli. Liam Lawson hasn't been protected. Nobody in Red Bull has been protected, except for management. Why were you protecting Christian Horner? But I'm happy that he's been doing well. He got points today. He was qualifying well. He was doing a post-race interview. He seemed cheery. I'm very happy to see that. I'm so happy to see that. I was really scared because I thought he did have a talent, and I was really scared that they really messed it up. And so I'm happy that doesn't seem to be the case. Yuki, obviously, he did well last weekend, and that gave me some hope having Laurent with him. Maybe just a bad weekend. We'll see how that goes. Again, well, I mean, car is not great. If Max is saying this and Yuki's finishing P17th, how bad is that really? Especially given how close everything's been. I don't know. I really didn't expect this significant of a fall off, but like I said in the Christian Horner video, the bleeding's got to stop at some point. Take the L and regroup and move forward. One last thing I actually want to mention, this is unrelated, we'll just move to the driver's standings now, but one thing I want to mention that I forgot to note down here, I wanted to talk about Lando Norris because I was really hyping him up last weekend in terms of how he responded to the media, and it disappointed me again today because they were talking about his win. You should just be, yeah, great, happy, excited. And then he starts talking about how he can improve, and not just how he can improve, but like being hard on himself. I'm still missing things. And I know like there's a way to say that where you're like, yeah, obviously I'm second in the championship. I got to make up 9 points and then maintain the gap myself. But he didn't say that. It still felt quite self-deprecating. And I'm like, dude, you won. You've closed the gap. You're 9 points behind Oscar. I'm not going to say it anymore. I'm going to say it again next in Zandvoort once he probably pisses me off again. But I just really wish... Again, I think I've said this before. Some people really don't like the Oscar Piastri or Verstappen type where they're very... it's hard to call Max level-headed. But, you know, very stoic, maybe not getting hard on themselves publicly. People call that arrogant, but then again, my main point with this, with Norris, is just you're giving the people the ammo, and it hurts me to see that happen to him, because I do think he's a very talented driver. And it's unfortunate to see him getting in his own head and in his own way sometimes. Okay, Drivers' Championship. So Piastri maintains the lead. It's been closed down to 9 points. We'll see how that goes. Again, I feel very confident at this point, saying I've said this multiple times. It's going to be one of them too. Verstappen's not out mathematically yet, but come on, let's be serious. Russell's still up there, ahead of both of the Ferraris. Antonelli. See, you guys are talking about, oh, too much pressure on Antonelli, too much. He's P7. He's P7. He's fine. Oh my God, he's fine. He's ahead of the best of the rest. Not even best of the rest. He's where I don't know where I predicted him, but probably right around there. Because he's not going to be better than the Mclarens. He's not going to be better than the Ferraris. He's not going to be better than George Russell. He's not going to be better than Verstappen. So where is he going to be? 7th. What I am very happily surprised about is Esteban Ocon in P8 and Hulkenberg in P9. They've maintained that now for a couple races. Very happy with them again. Ocon P10. Don't think I predicted any of that. I probably had the Aston Martins there. I actually don't remember, and I'm probably not going to check my predictions until the end of the year, so holding on that. Alonso and Stroll both jumped up quite significantly today. Hadjar unfortunately got bumped down from that because he didn't score points. Still no points for Colapinto we're doing. Behrman actually, I'm kind of realizing this for the first time. Behrman in P19 with Ocon in P10. That's interesting. The only rookie behind him is Colapinto and Dillon. That's interesting to me, actually. Even Bortoletto now 14th points in P17, so that's... Anyways, moving on to the team standings that I did not update. Give me a second. Sorry about that. Those are fixed now. Only move is Aston Martin jumping to P6 from P8 with their double points. Makes sense. And there is a closing in on the Williams from the Aston Martin and the Sauber. I mentioned the Sauber. I didn't mention the Aston Martin, but yeah, both. So 70 and then 52 and 51. That'll be interesting to see again. I don't know. Maybe the Williams have had enough of a buffer, but if we kind of halt upgrades from now on, and the Williams is where they are, and the Sauber is where they are, that could change. That could change. Still Alpine at the lowest, Haas second there, Racing Bulls. I don't know if I really expect that to change so significantly, especially at this point in the season where everybody is moving on to 2026 pretty much. McLaren, yeah, they run away with it. Like, I don't think they haven't won mathematically yet, obviously, but like, come on, it's gonna happen soon. I actually don't know when that could happen, but probably quite soon. Probably quite soon. So that's kind of all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching. If you watched this and you'd like to listen, it's available on all podcasting platforms. If you listened and you'd like to watch, please do watch on YouTube. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, rate, follow, all of the things. And I will see you at some point during the summer break for some mid-season discussions.